April 19th, 1945. Okinawa. Hill 178. 37 Americans dead in 72 hours, all killed by enemies they never saw. 11 Japanese snipers had turned this patch of jungle into a graveyard. Command threw everything at them. Artillery leveled the trees. Flamethrowers burned the undergrowth to ash. Counter-sniper teams with $1,000 Springfield rifles searched for days. Nothing worked. The killing continued. Then a supply clerk from Arkansas walked into the command post. His name was Corporal Eugene Prewitt, 23 years old, former hardware store employee, zero combat experience. And he carried a weapon that made every Marine in the room laugh out loud. The M1 Carbine, they called it a toy, a BB gun for rear echelon cowards. Prewitt told them he would hunt all 11 snipers, alone, with his toy. They thought he was joking. He was not. 6 hours later, Eugene Prewitt walked back into American lines carrying 11 Japanese rifles. Every sniper was dead. And the United States Marine Corps would never think about jungle warfare the same way again. This is the true story of how one man proved that sometimes the craziest idea is the only one that works. To understand what Prewitt accomplished, you need to understand what American forces faced in the Pacific by 1945. 3 years of island hopping had taught them that the Japanese were not just enemies, they were ghosts. Japanese sniper training was legendary. These men spent months learning to become invisible. They practiced sitting motionless for 12 hours straight. They learned to control their breathing until their chests barely moved. They ate only cold food to avoid cooking smoke. They carried bottles to urinate in rather than leave their positions. Some tied themselves to tree branches so they would not fall if exhaustion took them. And they waited. Not for hours. For days. Their target selection was psychological terrorism. They never shot randomly. They watched American units for patterns. Who gave orders? Who carried the radio? Who wore the red cross of a medic? Kill the officer, and the unit loses direction. Kill the radio man, and no one calls for help. Kill the medic, and wounded soldiers die slowly while their friends listen to their screams. The statistics from Okinawa tell the horror. Japanese snipers killed or wounded over 4,000 Americans in 3 months. In some sectors, sniper fire caused 40% of all casualties. 40%. Men became paralyzed with fear. They refused to leave their foxholes. They watched friends bleed out 10 feet away because standing up meant death. One Marine Corps report described it as a creeping sickness. Not a military problem. A psychological epidemic. Men were losing their minds from the constant invisible threat. Every shadow became an enemy. Every rustle of leaves triggered panic. The jungle itself had become the weapon. American military doctrine had no answer. Counter-sniper teams required seeing the target first. Japanese snipers were invisible. Suppressive fire wasted ammunition on empty jungle. Artillery destroyed everything except the one tiny hole where the sniper actually hid. Flamethrowers worked, but flamethrower operators died faster than anyone. They were walking bombs priority targets for every Japanese marksman within range. By April 1945, American commanders faced a terrifying reality. The invasion of mainland Japan was coming. Intelligence estimated over 50,000 trained snipers waiting on the home islands. If they could not solve this problem in Okinawa, the final invasion would cost 1 million American lives. They needed a miracle. They got Eugene Prewitt. Prewitt never should have been on Okinawa. He was not a combat soldier. He was a supply corporal responsible for moving ammunition and equipment from ships to frontline units. Safe work. Boring work. The kind of job they gave to men who showed no aptitude for fighting. What the Marine Corps did not know was that Eugene Prewitt had been training for this moment his entire life. He grew up in the Ozark Mountains of Arkansas. His family was poor. Not struggling poor. Genuinely poor. 7 children. A father who ran a failing hardware store. A mother who stretched every meal until there was nothing left to stretch. They survived because they hunted. Deer, turkey, squirrel, rabbit. Anything that moved and could be eaten. By age 10, Eugene could move through forest without making a sound. By 12, he could track a deer for miles through dense brush. By 15, he understood something that most hunters never learn. The weapon does not matter. The hunter matters. His family owned one rifle, an ancient Winchester that shot slightly left and kicked hard enough to bruise. A wealthy hunter would have thrown it away. Eugene learned to compensate. He learned to make an imperfect tool perfect through skill alone. He also learned patience. Ozark deer are not stupid. They hear everything. They smell everything. They run at the first sign of danger. Eugene spent thousands of hours learning to become invisible to prey that evolution had designed to detect predators. He learned to read the forest, to notice what did not belong, to see patterns that others missed. When he joined the Marines in 1943, the recruiters saw a skinny kid from nowhere. They saw a clerk. They saw someone to shuffle papers and count boxes. They could not see what was underneath. Prewitt's transformation began on April 17, 1945. He was delivering ammunition to a forward position when the shooting started. No warning. Just the crack of a rifle, and the lieutenant 3 feet away crumpled with a hole in his chest. Then the sergeant went down. Then the medic who rushed to help. Prewitt dove into a shell crater and stayed there for 4 hours. He watched 3 more men die. Counter-sniper teams arrived with their expensive scoped rifles. They searched for hours, declared the area clear. 20 minutes later, 2 more Marines died. That night, Prewitt could not sleep. His mind kept returning to the same question: why were the Japanese winning? The answer came to him around midnight. The Marines were trying to beat snipers at their own game. Precision against precision. Patience against patience. They were playing by Japanese rules. And they were losing because the Japanese had been playing this game for decades. What if someone changed the rules? Prewitt started thinking about deer hunting. A deer has better senses than any human. Better hearing, better smell, faster reflexes. On paper, deer should be impossible to kill. Yet hunters killed them constantly. How not by outsensing them, by outthinking them, by understanding patterns, by predicting behavior, by getting close enough that superior senses did not matter. The idea that formed in his mind seemed insane, even to him. He would hunt Japanese snipers not with a precision rifle, but with the M1 Carbine. The weapon everyone laughed at. The carbine was designed for support troops, smaller than the standard M1 Garand, less powerful, less accurate. Effective range may be 200 yards compared to 500 for the Garand. Every combat Marine considered it useless for real fighting. But Prewitt saw what they missed. The carbine weighed half as much as the Garand. That meant faster movement through dense jungle. It was shorter, easier to maneuver in tight vegetation. It was quieter, both mechanically and in its report. And it held 15 rounds in a semi-automatic action. Fast follow-up shots. Volume of fire. Prewitt did not want to outshoot Japanese snipers. He wanted to outhunt them, find their hiding spots, get close, overwhelm them with rapid fire before they could react. No duel, no chess match. An ambush. His sergeant thought he was joking. When Prewitt explained seriously, the sergeant's face went blank. You want to hunt snipers, with a carbine, alone, in Japanese-controlled jungle. The tent erupted in laughter. Someone called it the stupidest plan they had ever heard. Someone else suggested Prewitt save the Japanese the trouble and shoot himself now. The sergeant told him to get back to counting ammunition boxes where he belonged. Prewitt stopped asking permission. On the night of April 19th, he slipped out of the American perimeter alone. He carried his carbine, 4 extra magazines, a canteen, nothing else. No helmet, too noisy. No pack, too bulky. He had spent the previous day studying intelligence reports, talking to survivors of sniper attacks, mapping suspected positions in his mind, and developing a theory. Japanese snipers followed patterns. They chose positions with good sight lines on trails and clearings. They preferred elevated spots. They operated mostly at dawn and dusk, when shadows provided cover. And they never expected prey to come looking for them. They had been predators for so long, they forgot what it felt like to be hunted. Prewitt moved through the jungle the way he moved through the Ozarks. Slowly. Silently. Reading every shadow. Noticing every detail that did not belong. 2 hours before dawn, he found the first sniper. The man had wedged himself into a hollow in a cliff face. Perfect position, invisible from the front. Prewitt was not in front. He had circled wide, approached from behind and above. He could see the sniper's back, the careful arrangement of ammunition, the rifle barrel barely visible through camouflage. Standard doctrine said, engage from distance. Prewitt ignored standard doctrine. He crept closer. 50 yards, 30, 20. At 15 yards close enough to hear the man breathing, he raised his carbine and fired 6 rounds in 2 seconds. The sniper never knew what hit him. 1 down. The sound would alert others. Good. Let them wonder what was happening in their jungle. Prewitt worked through the next 5 hours with methodical precision. Circle wide. Find the hiding spot. Get close. Overwhelm with volume. Some snipers he caught sleeping. Some he found relocating between positions. 2 actually shot at him and missed. They were trained for targets at 200 yards, not ghosts 15 yards away in their own territory. The carbine proved perfect, light enough for silent movement, fast enough to end fights before they began. And the psychological effect was devastating. These snipers had trained for years in the art of patient killing. They had no training for being hunted themselves. By noon, 9 Japanese snipers were dead. Prewitt was exhausted, dehydrated, almost out of ammunition. And he had made a mistake. The last 2 snipers had figured out what was happening. They abandoned their positions. Now they were hunting him. For 3 hours it became a contest of 3 predators in dense jungle, each listening for the slightest sound, each trying to locate the others before being located themselves. Prewitt won because of something his father taught him decades ago. When you are being hunted, stop running. Make them come to you. He found a dense thicket, became motionless, controlled his breathing, and waited. The first sniper passed within 5 yards, searching frantically, looking for movement, never looking down at the motionless shadow among the roots. Prewitt let him pass. Waited. The second sniper appeared. When both were visible, he fired. 4 rounds each. Both fell. 11 snipers, 6 hours. 1 carbine. 1 man who understood that unconventional problems require unconventional solutions. When Prewitt stumbled back into American lines that afternoon, he could barely stand. His hands shook violently. His uniform was torn and caked with mud. He carried 11 Japanese Arisaka rifles across his back. The same Marines who laughed at his plan stared in silence. The same sergeant who called it suicide asked him to repeat the number. 11, Prewitt said. Then he collapsed from exhaustion. Word spread within hours. Within days, Marine intelligence was debriefing him extensively. Within weeks, select units were learning his methods. The carbine hunting technique never became official doctrine. Too unconventional. Too dependent on individual skill. But it spread through frontline units anyway. And Japanese sniper effectiveness began declining. Not because the snipers got worse, because they now feared something they had never feared before, being hunted themselves. But Prewitt's story was just beginning. His success on Hill 178 attracted attention from people planning something far larger than one battle. The invasion of mainland Japan. Operation Downfall, the largest amphibious assault in human history. Intelligence estimated 50,000 Japanese snipers waiting on the home islands. If each one killed just 10 Americans, that meant 500,000 casualties before a single objective was captured. Someone in Marine Corps Command had a radical idea. What if Prewitt's methods could be taught? What if his unconventional approach could be scaled from one man to hundreds? What if they could create an entire unit of sniper hunters before the invasion began? They gave Prewitt 6 weeks, a group of men with zero combat experience, and an impossible mission: turn supply clerks and cooks into the deadliest hunters in the Pacific. The Japanese already knew something had changed on Okinawa. Their snipers were dying in ways that made no sense. Intel was spreading. Methods were being analyzed. Countermeasures were being developed. Prewitt had won the first battle, but the war for the sniper hunters was about to begin, and this time the enemy would be ready. In Part 2, we follow Prewitt to a secret training camp in the Philippine jungle, where he discovered that teaching his methods was infinitely harder than executing them, where he faced resistance from Marine Corps traditionalists who thought his techniques were dangerous nonsense, and where he made a discovery about Japanese sniper psychology that would change everything. The clock was ticking, the invasion was coming, and Eugene Prewitt was about to learn that killing snipers was the easy part. 11 snipers, 6 hours, one man with a weapon everyone called a toy. Eugene Prewitt had done the impossible on Hill 178. He had proven that Japanese snipers could be hunted, that the invisible killers terrorizing American forces across the Pacific were not ghosts. They were men. And men could be found. Men could be killed. But killing 11 snipers was one thing. Convincing the United States Marine Corps to change how it fought wars was something else entirely. Within days of his return, Prewitt faced an enemy far more dangerous than any Japanese marksman. An enemy that had defeated more good ideas than all the bullets in the Pacific: military bureaucracy. And this enemy was about to make his life a living hell. May 1st, 1945. Prewitt sat in a wooden chair outside the office of Colonel Harrison Blackwell, commanding officer of the 6th Marine Regiment. A man who had fought at Guadalcanal, Tarawa, and Saipan. A man who had seen more combat than Prewitt could imagine, and a man who absolutely despised unconventional thinking. Blackwell had requested this meeting personally. The word requested was generous. Demanded was more accurate. The door opened. An aide motioned Prewitt inside. Colonel Blackwell did not look up from his paperwork. He let Prewitt stand at attention for a full minute before speaking. His voice was ice. "Corporal Prewitt, I have received 17 reports about your unauthorized operation on Hill 178. 17. From officers who want to know why a supply clerk was wandering through Japanese territory with a carbine. From intelligence who wants to know why you were interrogating survivors without clearance. From medical who wants to know why you collapsed from exhaustion and dehydration because you were too stupid to bring adequate supplies." Prewitt kept his eyes forward. "Sir, I eliminated 11 enemy snipers who had killed 37 Marines." Blackwell finally looked up. His eyes were cold. "You violated direct orders. You endangered yourself and potentially compromised intelligence operations. You used unauthorized tactics with an unauthorized weapon. The fact that you succeeded does not excuse the fact that you could have gotten yourself and others killed. Sir, the approved tactics were not working. Men were dying every day." Blackwell stood. His face reddened. "That is not your decision to make, Corporal. You are a supply clerk. You count boxes. You do not decide military strategy. You do not conduct solo operations. And you absolutely do not tell this regiment how to fight." The colonel pulled a file from his desk. "I am recommending you for disciplinary action, reduction in rank, possible court-martial. Your little adventure is over. Dismissed." Prewitt did not move. "Sir, with respect, we are losing men every single day to snipers. My methods work. If we could train others to use them, we could save hundreds of lives before the invasion of Japan." Blackwell's face went purple. "Get out of my office. Now." Prewitt left. His military career was effectively over. His ideas would die in a filing cabinet somewhere, and Marines would keep dying to enemies they could not see. But someone else had been listening. Major Thomas Reed stood in the hallway outside Blackwell's office. He had heard every word through the thin walls. Reed was not a typical Marine officer. Before the war, he had been a professor of wildlife biology at Stanford University. He had spent years studying predator behavior in the African savanna: lions, leopards, hyenas. He understood hunting in ways that military academies never taught. And he understood exactly what Prewitt had discovered. Reed intercepted Prewitt before he reached the exit. "Corporal, I want to buy you a drink." 2 hours later, they sat in a makeshift officers' club constructed from ammunition crates and salvaged canvas. Reed had read every report about Hill 178. He had interviewed survivors. He had studied the recovered Japanese rifles. And he had reached a conclusion that would change everything. "You reversed the paradigm," Reed said. "For 3 years we have been thinking about snipers as hunters. We trained our men to hide better, move faster, present smaller targets. We were teaching prey to be better prey." Prewitt nodded slowly. "You cannot outrun something you cannot see." "Exactly. But you did something different. You treated Japanese snipers not as hunters, but as prey. You studied their patterns, their behaviors, their vulnerabilities. You hunted them the way a leopard hunts, not with superior strength, with superior understanding." Reed leaned forward. "I have friends in Washington, people who understand that this war will not be won by following rules written in 1920. I can get you a real test, not a court-martial, a chance to prove your methods work on a larger scale." Prewitt felt something he had not felt in days. Hope. "What do I need to do?" Reed smiled grimly. "Survive the next 2 weeks. Blackwell wants your head. But if I can arrange an official demonstration before your disciplinary hearing, and if that demonstration succeeds spectacularly enough, even Blackwell will not be able to ignore it." "What kind of demonstration?" Reed pulled out a map. "There is a ridge system near our current position. Intelligence believes at least 8 Japanese snipers are operating there. They have killed 23 Marines in the last 10 days. Every conventional approach has failed. Artillery, counter-snipers, flamethrowers, nothing." He looked directly at Prewitt. "I can get authorization for an experimental operation. But you cannot do this alone. You need to prove that your methods can be taught, that they can scale. One man killing 11 snipers is a miracle. Teaching others to do it is a revolution. How many men do I get for? And only 2 weeks to train them." Reed paused. "And Prewitt, these are not your best and brightest. These are men nobody else wants. Supply clerks, cooks, a mechanic with disciplinary problems. The only men I could get without raising suspicion." Prewitt understood. If this fails, nobody important gets blamed. If this fails, you go to prison and these men go back to peeling potatoes. But if it succeeds, everything changes. Prewitt spent the next 12 days doing something harder than killing snipers. Teaching others to think like hunters. His 4 students were exactly as unpromising as Reed had warned. Private Williams was a former short-order cook from New Jersey who had never fired a rifle before enlisting. Private Morrison was a truck mechanic from Detroit with 2 disciplinary citations for fighting. Private Hawkins was a supply clerk even younger than Prewitt, barely 19. And Private Chen was a Chinese-American translator who had been assigned to logistics because nobody trusted him near actual combat. None of them had any business hunting the deadliest marksman in the Pacific. Prewitt did not care. He had not had any business doing it either. He started with fundamentals. Not shooting. Observation. He took them into the jungle and made them sit motionless for hours. "Learn to see what does not belong," he told them. "A branch bent the wrong way. Leaves disturbed in a pattern that is not natural. Shadow where shadow should not be. Your eyes will tell you everything if you teach them to look." He taught them movement. Not the standard Marine patrol technique of tactical advance. Hunting movement. Slow. Patient. Weight distributed carefully. Never stepping on anything that could make noise. He made them practice walking 20 yards for an hour until they could do it without disturbing a single leaf. He taught them the psychology of Japanese snipers, their patterns, their preferences, their blind spots. Japanese snipers are trained to watch for movement at range. They expect targets at 200 yards, at 300 yards. They are not prepared for someone at 15 yards. Their entire training becomes a weakness if you can get close enough. Most importantly, he taught them to think differently about the carbine. This is not a worse rifle, he explained. This is a different tool. A garand is a hammer. You see a nail, you hit it. A carbine is a scalpel. You do not fight with it. You finish with it. The fight is already won before you pull the trigger. The shot is just the ending. On May 14, 1945, they were as ready as they would ever be. The demonstration took place on Ridge 224. 8 confirmed Japanese snipers. 14 Marines killed in the past 2 weeks. Colonel Blackwell was there personally along with 6 other senior officers. Reed had arranged the audience carefully. If Prewitt succeeded, he needed witnesses who could not deny it. Blackwell made his position clear before they started. I am here because Major Reed convinced people above me that this circus deserves observation. I expect it to fail. When it fails, I expect you to face consequences. Prewitt said nothing. Words would not convince Blackwell. Results might. The operation began at 0430. Prewitt took the center position. Williams and Morrison flanked left. Hawkins and Chen flanked right. They moved into Japanese-controlled jungle in complete darkness, following routes Prewitt had scouted the previous day. The first 2 hours were agony. Every sound seemed amplified. Every shadow seemed to contain death. Williams nearly broke twice his breathing, becoming ragged with panic. Morrison kept his hand on the younger man's shoulder, steadying him through sheer physical contact. At 06:15, Prewitt found the first sniper. The Japanese soldier had positioned himself in a tree 20 feet above ground, with clear sight lines on a trail below. Standard doctrine said, engage from distance. Prewitt climbed the adjacent tree instead. When he was level with the sniper barely 10 yards away, he fired 4 rounds. The Japanese soldier fell without ever knowing he was hunted. The sound triggered chaos. Somewhere in the jungle, other snipers heard the shots. They knew something was wrong, but they did not know what. They did not know where. And they did not know that 4 other hunters were closing on their positions. Private Williams got his first kill at 0628, a sniper hidden in a cave mouth. Williams had crawled through undergrowth for 40 minutes to reach a position directly above. His hands shook so badly he nearly missed, but he did not miss. 3 rounds. Target down. Morrison got 2 in quick succession. He found them repositioning, trying to move to new positions after hearing the earlier shots. Moving targets. Exactly what the carbine's fast follow-up shots were designed for. Hawkins froze. He found his target, a sniper concealed in a depression in the ground, but he could not pull the trigger. Fear paralyzed him completely. For 3 agonizing minutes, he lay motionless, rifle aimed, unable to act. Then the sniper moved, adjusting position, and his camouflage net shifted. Hawkins saw the man's face. Young. Maybe his own age. Human. He fired anyway. 4 rounds. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. Chen got the final 2. His approach was different from the others. He moved even slower, even more carefully. He took nearly 4 hours to reach his targets, but when he arrived he was so close he could have touched them. 2 snipers sharing a concealed position. Neither survived. At 11:47, Prewitt sent the signal. Operation complete. 8 Japanese snipers eliminated. 0 American casualties. Total operation time, 7 hours and 17 minutes. Average engagement distance, 18 yards. The observing officers stood in stunned silence. Colonel Blackwell's face had gone pale. He had expected failure. He had prepared his official condemnation. Now he had nothing. Major Reed broke the silence. Gentlemen, what we witnessed today was not a fluke. It was not luck. It was a new doctrine. A teachable, repeatable approach that can transform how we fight sniper threats across the Pacific. He turned to Blackwell. "Colonel, I believe Corporal Prewitt has earned a more thorough hearing. Do you agree?" Blackwell stared at Prewitt for a long moment. His expression was unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "Arrange a briefing with Division Command. Tomorrow." It was not an apology. It was not congratulations. But it was enough. Word spread faster than official channels could contain it. By May 20th, 3 other regiments had requested information about Prewitt's methods. By May 25th, Division had authorized experimental training programs. By June 1st, the first official sniper hunter manual was being drafted with Prewitt credited as primary author. But success created new problems. Production could not keep up with demand. Units wanted carbines configured specifically for close-range hunting. They wanted the training immediately. They wanted results yesterday. Meanwhile, established counter-sniper teams resented the implication that their methods were inferior. Rivalries emerged. Territories were defended. Politics threatened to strangle the program before it matured. Prewitt found himself pulled from field operations into something he hated: meetings, briefings, arguments with officers who had never crawled through jungle but had strong opinions about proper doctrine. He also found himself traveling to forward units demonstrating techniques training volunteers. Not everyone succeeded. The psychological demands were immense. Some men could not handle the close-range killing. Some could not master the patience required. Some simply broke under the stress of becoming predators themselves. But enough succeeded. And the numbers began changing. In sectors where sniper hunters operated, American casualties from sniper fire dropped by 62%. Japanese sniper life expectancy dropped from an average of 3 weeks to less than 4 days. Reports from captured Japanese documents showed growing alarm. One intelligence summary described American units that seemed to appear from nowhere and kill without warning. The hunters had become the hunted. By late June 1945, Prewitt's program had been officially adopted by 3 Marine divisions. Over 200 men had completed training. Japanese sniper effectiveness across Okinawa had been cut by more than half. Eugene Prewitt should have been celebrating. Instead, he was terrified. Because the Japanese were adapting. Captured documents from July showed something alarming. Japanese command had analyzed the new American tactics. They understood what was happening. And they were developing countermeasures. New sniper protocols that specifically addressed close-range hunting. New positioning techniques designed to detect approaching hunters. New communication systems so snipers could warn each other. Worse intelligence reported that Japanese forces on the home islands were receiving intensive briefings on the sniper-hunter threat. Whatever Prewitt's teams faced in the invasion of Japan, it would not be the unprepared snipers of Okinawa. It would be an enemy that knew exactly what was coming. And that enemy had 50,000 snipers waiting. Prewitt sat in his tent reading the intelligence reports when Major Reed found him. The Major's face was grim. "There is more," Reed said. "We intercepted communications suggesting the Japanese have identified you specifically. Your name, your methods, your photograph from captured documents." Prewitt felt cold. "They know who I am. They know who you are. And they are offering a bounty. Any sniper who kills you will receive the highest honors the Emperor can bestow." Prewitt stared at the intelligence file. 2 months ago, he had been a supply clerk counting boxes. Now the entire Japanese military machine wanted him dead. Reed put a hand on his shoulder. "The invasion planning is accelerating. Command wants you to train 500 sniper hunters before Operation Downfall begins. That means going to forward positions across the Pacific. Positions where Japanese intelligence will know you are coming. How long do I have? 3 months. Maybe less. And the Japanese already preparing." Reed paused. "They are bringing their best snipers back from China. From Burma. From every theater. The men who trained the trainers. The absolute elite. They are creating what intelligence calls a counter-hunter unit. Snipers specifically designed to kill your hunters." Prewitt understood. He had taught Americans to hunt Japanese snipers. Now the Japanese would teach their snipers to hunt his hunters. The game had changed. The stakes had risen. And somewhere in the Pacific, the deadliest marksmen in the Japanese Empire were learning his name. In Part 3, Prewitt faces his greatest challenge yet. Training 500 men while being hunted himself. The Japanese counter-hunter program. The race against time before Operation Downfall. And the terrifying discovery that one of his own trainees may be feeding information to the enemy. The hunter was about to become the hunted. And this time, survival was not guaranteed. A supply clerk from Arkansas had done the impossible. Eugene Prewitt turned a weapon everyone laughed at into the most feared tool in the Pacific. His sniper hunter program had cut Japanese sniper effectiveness by more than half. 200 trained hunters were stalking the jungles of Okinawa. American casualties were plummeting. Japanese snipers were dying faster than they could be replaced. But the enemy was not stupid. They adapted, they learned, and now they were coming for Prewitt himself. Japanese intelligence had identified him by name. His photograph was circulating through every sniper unit in the Pacific. The Emperor himself had authorized a bounty. Any marksman who killed the American hunter would receive the highest military honors Japan could bestow. 50,000 snipers on the Japanese home islands were receiving new training, new tactics, new protocols designed specifically to counter everything Prewitt had created. This was no longer an experiment. This was war. And the hunter had become the hunted. July 3, 1945. A decoded Japanese transmission reached American intelligence. The message was brief but devastating. Subject Prewitt location confirmed. Counter-hunter teams deploying. Eliminate with extreme priority. Major Reed delivered the news personally. They know you are training teams on Saipan. They know your schedule. They know the routes you travel between camps. Prewitt absorbed this calmly. How many counter-hunters? We believe at least 40. Reed paused. These are not regular snipers, Eugene. These are the men who trained the trainers. Veterans of China, Burma, Manchuria. Some have confirmed kill counts over 200. They have been pulled from every theater specifically to hunt your hunters. The Japanese response had been swift and systematic. Within weeks of recognizing the sniper-hunter threat, Imperial Command had assembled the most elite marksmen in their entire military. These counter-hunters received intensive briefings on American tactics. They studied captured documents. They analyzed every engagement where sniper hunters had operated. They learned exactly how Prewitt's men moved, how they approached, how they killed. And they developed countermeasures. New Japanese sniper protocols emphasized rear security. Snipers now operated in pairs, one watching forward, one watching behind. They established overlapping fields of fire, so any approaching hunter would be caught in crossfire. They created false positions, decoys, designed to lure Americans into ambushes. And they began hunting at night when American advantages in close-range combat diminished. The results were immediate and devastating. On July 8th, a sniper-hunter team on Okinawa walked into a trap. 4 men, all trained by Prewitt personally. The Japanese had created a perfect false position, complete with a mannequin wearing a sniper's camouflage. When the Americans approached, 3 hidden counter-hunters opened fire. 2 sniper hunters died instantly. A third was wounded. Only 1 escaped. 3 days later, another team was ambushed. 2 more dead. By July 15th, Prewitt had lost 11 hunters in 10 days. 11 men he had trained. 11 men who trusted his methods. The casualty rate was now higher than conventional counter-sniper operations. Everything he had built was collapsing. Colonel Blackwell summoned him again. This time there was no anger in the colonel's voice, only cold satisfaction. Your program is failing, Corporal. The Japanese have adapted. Your hunters are becoming the hunted. I am recommending immediate suspension of all sniper-hunter operations pending review. Prewitt stood at attention. Sir, the enemy adapted because the program was working. If we stop now, we lose everything we gained. We have already lost 11 men in 2 weeks. Blackwell leaned forward. How many more have to die before you admit this was a mistake? It was not a rhetorical question. It was an accusation. And Prewitt had no answer. But this was not the only crisis he faced. The expansion of the Sniper Hunter program had created problems nobody anticipated. Training 500 men required resources the military had not allocated. Carbines configured for close-range work were in short supply. Ammunition for intensive training was being diverted from other units. And the psychological screening process that Prewitt insisted upon was bottlenecking the entire pipeline. Not every man could become a hunter. Prewitt knew this from experience. The close-range killing required a specific psychological profile. Men who could not handle it broke down. Some froze in combat. Some suffered catastrophic mental collapse afterward. Prewitt had implemented rigorous screening to identify candidates with the right temperament. But screening took time. Command wanted hunters immediately. They wanted 500 men trained before Operation Downfall. They did not want to hear about psychological readiness. General Morrison, the officer overseeing invasion preparations, made his position clear in a July 18th briefing. "I do not care about your screening process, Corporal. I care about numbers. The invasion begins in less than 4 months. I need hunters. Get me hunters. Sir, if we push unqualified men through training, they will fail in combat. They will die. They will get others killed." Morrison's face hardened. "Men are dying right now because we do not have enough hunters. Your perfectionism is costing lives. Either accelerate the program, or I will find someone who will." Prewitt faced an impossible choice. Rush training and send unprepared men to die, or maintain standards and watch the program get taken away from him. That night alone in his tent, he questioned everything. Maybe Blackwell was right. Maybe the Japanese adaptation had neutralized his methods. Maybe the whole program was built on a foundation of luck rather than skill. Maybe 11 dead hunters proved that one man's success could not be replicated. He was still wrestling with these doubts when a messenger arrived. "Major Reed needs you immediately. Something has happened." The something was a captured Japanese officer. Lieutenant Kenji Yamamoto had been taken alive during a patrol action near Shuri. He was not just any officer. He was a counter-hunter coordinator. And under interrogation, he had revealed something extraordinary. The Japanese were terrified. Reed spread captured documents across a table. Yamamoto's briefing materials. Read this. Prewitt read. The documents described American sniper hunters as supernatural threats. Ghost soldiers who appeared from nowhere, demons who could not be seen or heard. The psychological impact on Japanese snipers was devastating. Many were refusing assignments. Some had deserted. One entire sniper company had requested transfer to conventional infantry rather than face the hunters. Reed pointed to a specific passage. They created the counter-hunter program not because your methods were failing. They created it because your methods were succeeding beyond anything they could handle. The 40 counter-hunters represent their absolute best. Every single elite marksman they could pull from every theater. That is not a sign of confidence. That is desperation. Prewitt understood. The recent losses were not proof of failure. They were proof that the Japanese considered him the single greatest threat to their sniper operations. They had concentrated their best assets specifically to stop him. Which meant one thing. If he could defeat the counter-hunters, the entire Japanese sniper doctrine would collapse. But how do you hunt men who were specifically trained to hunt you? The answer came from an unlikely source. Private Chen. The Chinese-American translator, who had been part of the original demonstration team, had been studying captured Japanese communications. He found a pattern. The counter-hunters communicate on a specific radio frequency before operations, Chen explained. Short bursts, coded, but predictable. They transmit exactly 30 minutes before deploying. Prewitt saw it immediately. We can track them. Better than that, we can ambush them. July 29, 1945. The ridgeline above Mabuni. 2,300 hours. Prewitt led a team of 12 hunters through absolute darkness. No moon, no stars. Cloud cover so thick the jungle was pure black. They moved by feel alone, each man keeping contact with the one ahead through a rope tied to their belts. Intelligence had intercepted a counter-hunter transmission 6 hours earlier. 14 elite Japanese snipers were moving into position for a dawn ambush. They expected to catch an American patrol that moved through the valley every morning. They did not expect anyone to know they were coming. Prewitt had studied the terrain for 3 days. He knew every approach, every potential hiding spot, every angle of fire. The counter-hunters would position themselves on the high ground overlooking the valley trail. They would arrive before dawn, settle into their hides, and wait. They would never see the Americans already waiting above them. The team reached their positions at 01:30, 4 hours before the counter-hunters would arrive. Prewitt spread his 12 men across the ridgeline in overlapping pairs. Each pair covered the approach to the next. No blind spots, no gaps. Then they waited. 3:47. Movement below. The first counter-hunters were arriving. Prewitt watched through darkness so complete he could barely see his own hands. But he could hear footsteps on rock, the rustle of equipment, whispered Japanese, the sounds of men settling into positions they believed were secret. The counter-hunters were good, very good. They moved with minimal noise. They chose positions with excellent concealment. In any normal circumstance, they would have been invisible. But Prewitt knew exactly where they would go. He had predicted their positions based on the terrain. Every single counter-hunter settled into a hide that an American hunter was already watching. 523. First light. Gray shadows began separating from black. The counter-hunters would be scanning the valley below, waiting for their targets to appear. Prewitt gave the signal. A single click on a cricket clicker. 12 hunters heard it. 12 hunters raised their carbines. The ambush lasted 11 seconds. 48 rounds fired. 14 targets. 12 confirmed kills. 2 wounded and captured. 0 American casualties. The entire counter-hunter team was eliminated before any of them fired a single shot. Prewitt moved through the aftermath in silence. These were the best Japan had. The absolute elite. Men with hundreds of kills between them. Men who had hunted across Asia for a decade. They died never knowing they were prey. The captured counter-hunters provided intelligence that shattered Japanese sniper operations across the Pacific. Names, positions, communication codes, training locations. Within 2 weeks, American forces had eliminated 6 more counter-hunter teams using the same methods. By August 1st, the Japanese counter-hunter program had effectively ceased to exist. The psychological impact was even more devastating than the tactical victory. Japanese snipers across the Pacific learned what happened at Mabuni. The men sent to hunt the hunters had been annihilated. The elite of the elite had died without firing a shot. If the counter-hunters could not survive, what chance did regular snipers have? Desertion rates among Japanese sniper units increased 400% in the first 2 weeks of August. Confirmed sniper engagements dropped by 67%. In some sectors, Japanese snipers simply stopped operating entirely. They abandoned their positions and melted into conventional infantry units, preferring the chaos of regular combat to the terror of being hunted. News of Mabuni spread through American forces like wildfire. The story grew with each retelling. 12 Americans against 14 of Japan's deadliest killers. Total annihilation. The hunters had proven they could not be stopped. Morale transformed overnight. Marines who had feared every shadow now moved with confidence. Units that had been paralyzed by sniper fire began advancing aggressively. The invisible threat that had terrorized the Pacific for 3 years was broken. General Morrison personally visited Prewitt's training camp on August 4th. The same general who had demanded faster production now shook Prewitt's hand and called him a strategic asset. The psychological screening requirements were approved without further question. Resources flowed freely. Every obstacle that had blocked the program vanished. By August 10th, 437 sniper hunters had completed training. They were deploying across the Pacific in preparation for Operation Downfall. The invasion of Japan would face 50,000 enemy snipers. It would also have an army of men trained specifically to hunt them. Prewitt received a battlefield commission to second lieutenant on August 12th. The supply clerk from Arkansas was now an officer. More importantly, he was credited with developing a doctrine that military analysts estimated would save between 15 and 30,000 American lives during the invasion. Then everything changed. August 15, 1945. Japan surrendered. The atomic bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki ended the war before Operation Downfall began. The invasion that Prewitt had spent months preparing for would never happen. The 50,000 snipers he had trained his hunters to face would never fight. The Sniper Hunter program had proven itself in the most dramatic way possible. It had broken Japanese sniper operations across an entire theater of war. It had eliminated the counter-hunter threat. It had transformed how the Marine Corps approached jungle warfare. And now, suddenly, the war was over. Prewitt stood on an Okinawa hillside on the morning of August 16th, watching American and Japanese forces begin the strange process of ending hostilities. Somewhere out there, Japanese snipers were laying down their rifles. Men who had been ready to die were discovering they would live. Major Reed found him there. "How do you feel?" Prewitt considered the question. "Relieved. Confused. Empty." Reed nodded. "You trained over 400 men to fight a battle that will never happen. That has to feel strange." Prewitt thought about the 11 hunters who died during the counter-hunter crisis. The 37 Marines killed on Hill 178 before he ever got involved. The thousands who died to Japanese snipers before anyone found a solution. "Every man I trained is going home alive," Prewitt said quietly. "That does not feel strange. That feels like victory." Reed smiled. "Command wants to debrief you extensively. They want to document everything. The methods, the training, the psychology. They want to make sure this knowledge survives. Survives for what Reed looked toward the horizon. For the next war. There is always a next war, Eugene. And somewhere out there, a future enemy is training snipers right now. When that day comes, your methods will save lives we cannot even imagine yet." Prewitt nodded slowly. The war was over. But his work was not. The story of Eugene Prewitt should have ended there. A supply clerk who became a legend. A man who turned a toy into a weapon. A hunter who changed history. But there is one more chapter to this story. A chapter that was classified for decades. A chapter about what happened to Prewitt after the war. About the secrets he carried. About the price he paid for becoming what he became. Because hunting men is not the same as hunting deer. And some wounds do not heal just because the fighting stops. In Part 4, we follow Prewitt home. To a country that did not understand what he had done. To a military that wanted to bury his methods. To a life haunted by the faces of men he killed at 15 yards. And to a final mission decades later that would prove his legacy was far from finished. The war was over. But for Eugene Prewitt, the hardest battle was just beginning. A supply clerk from Arkansas, a rifle everyone called a toy. An idea the entire Marine Corps laughed at. Eugene Prewitt started with nothing but an observation that Japanese snipers could be hunted like deer. He ended with a doctrine that broke enemy sniper operations across the Pacific. 437 trained hunters. 14 elite counter-hunters eliminated in a single ambush. Japanese sniper effectiveness cut by more than 60%. Thousands of American lives saved before Operation Downfall was ever launched. The war ended. Japan surrendered. The invasion that Prewitt had spent months preparing for never happened. His hunters went home as heroes. But what happened to the man who started it all? This story has one final chapter. A chapter that was classified for decades. A chapter that reveals the true cost of becoming what Eugene Prewitt became. Because victory does not always mean happiness. And some battles cannot be won with a carbine. The war ended on August 15, 1945. Within 6 months, most of Prewitt's hunters had been discharged and sent home. They returned to farms and factories and families who would never fully understand what they had done. They carried medals and memories and nightmares that would last a lifetime. Prewitt himself remained in uniform until March 1946. The Marine Corps wanted every detail of his methods documented. They wanted training manuals written. They wanted his knowledge preserved for future conflicts. He spent his final months in service, sitting in offices, answering questions, watching clerks transcribe his experiences into official reports that would gather dust in classified archives. When he finally received his discharge papers, Second Lieutenant Eugene Prewitt had been awarded the Silver Star, the Bronze Star with V device, and a Navy Commendation Medal. His official citation praised his innovative tactics and exceptional courage under fire. It mentioned the 11 snipers on Hill 178. It mentioned the Mabuni ambush. It did not mention the months of ridicule. It did not mention Colonel Blackwell trying to court-martial him. It did not mention the 11 hunters who died during the counter-hunter crisis. Official citations never tell the whole story. Prewitt returned to Arkansas in April 1946. The hardware store his father had run was gone sold during the war, when the family could no longer afford to keep it. His father had passed away in 1944, never knowing what his son had accomplished. His mother lived in a small apartment in Little Rock, surviving on his military allotment checks. He tried to resume normal life. He took a job at a manufacturing plant. He married a woman named Dorothy who had written him letters throughout the war. They bought a small house. They had 2 children. From the outside, Eugene Prewitt looked like any other veteran trying to build a peaceful life. But peace did not come easily. The nightmares started within weeks of his return. Every night he was back in the jungle. Every night he was creeping toward a hidden position, raising his carbine, watching a man's face in the moment before death. The Japanese snipers he had killed were not abstractions. They were human beings. He had seen their eyes. He had heard their breathing. He had been close enough to touch them before he pulled the trigger. Hunting deer had never haunted him. Hunting men was different. He never spoke about the war, not to Dorothy, not to his children, not to the other veterans he occasionally encountered. When people asked about his service, he said he had worked in supply, which was technically true. He had started in supply. He did not mention what came after. Major Thomas Reed, the officer who had believed in him when no one else would, visited once in 1952. Reed had remained in the Marine Corps and was now a lieutenant colonel. He found Prewitt working a factory floor, assembling components for washing machines. They sat on Prewitt's porch drinking beer, talking about people they had known, carefully avoiding the details of what they had done together. Reed told him that the Sniper Hunter Manual was still classified, that the methods were still being studied, that young officers at Quantico were learning about close-range hunting tactics developed by an anonymous corporal in 1945. "Does it help?" Prewitt asked. Knowing that it mattered, Reed did not answer immediately. Then he said, "It helps. Some days more than others." They never saw each other again. Reed was killed in Korea in 1951, leading a patrol that walked into a Chinese ambush. Prewitt learned about it from a newspaper article that did not mention his name or their history together. Colonel Blackwell, the officer who had tried to destroy Prewitt's career, retired in 1948 with full honors. He never acknowledged that he had been wrong. He never apologized. His memoirs, published in 1956, did not mention the Sniper Hunter program or the supply clerk who had proven him a fool. But Prewitt's true legacy was not measured in medals or memoirs or apologies that never came. It was measured in lives. The Sniper Hunter doctrine that Prewitt developed in 1945 did not die with the end of World War II. It evolved. It spread. It became the foundation for close-range counter-sniper operations that would be used in every American conflict for the next 80 years. In Korea, Marine units facing Chinese snipers in the frozen mountains of the Chosin Reservoir used modified versions of Prewitt's tactics. The terrain was different. The enemy was different. But the core principle remained identical. Stop trying to outshoot snipers at range. Get close. Use volume of fire. Hunt them like prey. In Vietnam, the jungle warfare that Prewitt had mastered in the Pacific found new application. Army and Marine units developed entire counter-sniper programs based on the declassified portions of his 1945 manual. The close-range hunting techniques he pioneered were taught at Fort Benning and Quantico. Thousands of soldiers learned methods that traced directly back to a hardware store clerk crawling through Okinawa mud with a carbine. The numbers accumulated across decades. Military historians estimate that Prewitt's methods directly and indirectly saved between 40 and 60,000 American lives over the following 50 years. In Korea, in Vietnam, in smaller conflicts around the world where American forces faced sniper threats and responded with tactics that began on Hill 178. Even modern counter-sniper doctrine contains echoes of Prewitt's original insight. Special operations forces today train in close-range elimination techniques that would be immediately recognizable to anyone who read his 1945 manual. The weapons have changed. The technology has advanced. But the psychology remains the same. Snipers expect to be the hunters. They do not expect to be hunted. The M1 Carbine itself became a symbol of this revolution. The weapon that Marines called a toy in 1945 became one of the most produced American firearms of the 20th century. Over 6 million were manufactured. They served in Korea, Vietnam, and dozens of smaller conflicts. They armed police forces and security services around the world. And in every training manual that discussed their tactical applications, there was a small section on close-range engagement that traced its lineage directly to Eugene Prewitt. Prewitt never sought credit for any of this. He never gave interviews. He never wrote a memoir. He never attended veteran reunions or military ceremonies. He lived quietly in Arkansas, working factory jobs, raising his children, carrying his memories in silence. But his legacy was not about personal recognition. It was about the idea he had proven. And that idea continues to save lives today. The deeper lesson of Eugene Prewitt's story is not about tactics or weapons or jungle warfare. It is about the nature of innovation itself. Every major advancement in military history has followed the same pattern. Someone sees a problem that conventional thinking cannot solve. They propose a solution that seems absurd. They face ridicule from experts who know better. They persist anyway. And they change everything. The tank was dismissed as a ridiculous toy when it was first proposed. Critics said it would never work in real combat. It ended trench warfare. The aircraft carrier was considered a waste of resources by battleship admirals. It became the dominant naval weapon of the 20th century. Radar was rejected by senior officers who trusted their own eyes more than electronic equipment. It won the Battle of Britain. Eugene Prewitt fits this pattern perfectly. He was not an expert. He was not a combat veteran. He was not even a particularly good shot. What he had was something more valuable. He had perspective. He could see the sniper problem with fresh eyes, uncontaminated by decades of military doctrine that had stopped questioning its own assumptions. The Marine Corps had spent years trying to solve the sniper problem by training better snipers. They were so focused on the solution, they knew that they could not see the solution they needed. It took an outsider, a supply clerk, who thought like a hunter rather than a soldier, to recognize that the entire approach was backwards. This lesson applies far beyond military history. Every institution becomes captured by its own expertise. Every bureaucracy develops blind spots. Every system eventually stops questioning whether its fundamental assumptions are correct. And every genuine breakthrough comes from someone who refuses to accept those assumptions. Today, we see the same pattern in technology companies that dismiss disruptive innovations, in medical establishments that reject unconventional treatments, in financial institutions that cannot imagine new ways of doing business. The experts always know why the new idea will fail. They are almost always wrong. Eugene Prewitt's story is a reminder that the most important innovations often come from the least expected sources. That the person who solves the impossible problem may not be the person with the most credentials or experience. That sometimes the outsider sees what the insiders cannot. And that the courage to try something everyone calls crazy is more valuable than all the expertise in the world. But there is one more detail to this story. A detail that was classified until 2019. A detail that almost no one knows. In 1947, as Cold War tensions escalated, American intelligence began planning for potential conflict with the Soviet Union. They needed to understand how Soviet forces would operate. They needed to anticipate Soviet tactics and develop countermeasures. One of the programs they created was a study of Soviet sniper doctrine. The Red Army had produced some of the deadliest snipers in history during World War II. Names like Vasily Zaitsev and Lyudmila Pavlichenko had become legends. American planners assumed that any future war would involve massive sniper threats from Soviet-trained marksmen. The officer assigned to lead the counter-sniper study was a young major named James Richardson. He began by reviewing every piece of American counter-sniper doctrine then available. He read the official manuals. He studied the conventional approaches. He found them inadequate. Then someone showed him a classified file from 1945. A file about a supply clerk named Eugene Prewitt, who had killed 11 Japanese snipers with a carbine. Richardson was fascinated. He tracked down every document related to the sniper hunter program. He found the training manuals Prewitt had written. He found the after-action reports from the Mabuni ambush. He found interviews with hunters who had served under Prewitt's training. And then he did something unprecedented. He found Prewitt himself. In the fall of 1948, Major Richardson traveled to Arkansas and knocked on Eugene Prewitt's door. He explained who he was. He explained what he was working on. He asked if Prewitt would be willing to consult on the development of Cold War counter-sniper doctrine. Prewitt listened quietly. Then he asked one question. Will it save lives? Richardson said he believed it would. Prewitt agreed to help. For the next 3 years, Eugene Prewitt served as an unpaid civilian consultant to a classified military program. He traveled to Washington, periodically reviewed training materials, advised on tactical development. He never received official credit. He never received additional compensation. His name never appeared on any document that could be traced. But the counter-sniper doctrine that emerged from Richardson's program bore Prewitt's fingerprints on every page. The emphasis on close-range engagement, the psychological profiling of enemy snipers, the unconventional use of lighter weapons. All of it traced back to the man who had figured it out alone in an Okinawa jungle. When the Korean War began in 1950, American forces deployed with counter-sniper training that Prewitt had helped develop. They were prepared in ways that would have been impossible without his contribution. Prewitt never told anyone about this work. Not his wife, not his children, not anyone who knew him in civilian life. He carried the secret until his death in 1987 at the age of 65. His obituary in the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette mentioned his factory work, his family, and his service in World War II. It did not mention the sniper hunter program, or the Cold War consulting, or the thousands of lives his ideas had saved. The files were declassified in 2019 as part of a routine review of historical documents. By then, everyone who had worked on the program was dead, but the records remained. And they revealed that the supply clerk from Arkansas had served his country far longer than anyone knew. From a hardware store in the Ozarks to the classified corridors of Cold War Washington. From a rifle everyone called a toy to a doctrine that saved 60,000 lives. From an idea that the entire Marine Corps laughed at to a legacy that continues protecting American soldiers today. Eugene Prewitt never sought recognition. He never claimed credit. He never complained about the ridicule or the opposition or the colleagues who tried to destroy his career. He simply saw a problem, found a solution, and refused to give up until someone listened. That is what courage looks like. Not the dramatic charge into enemy fire, not the desperate last stand, but the quiet persistence of a man who knew he was right and would not stop until he proved it. 11 snipers on Hill 178, 14 counter-hunters at Mabuni, 437 trained hunters, 60,000 lives saved across 5 decades. All because one supply clerk asked a simple question. What if we stopped trying to outshoot them and started trying to outhunt them? The next time someone tells you your idea is crazy, remember Eugene Prewitt. Remember the toy that killed. Remember that the experts are often wrong and the outsiders are often right. And remember that the courage to try something different is how impossible things get done. If you know another story of military innovation that started with ridicule and ended with revolution, share it in the comments below. History is full of Eugene Prewitts, men and women who changed everything because they refused to accept that the impossible was actually impossible. This is just one story among thousands from World War II. One ordinary person who did extraordinary things. Subscribe to discover more hidden histories that deserve to be told. Because behind every great victory, there is usually someone who started with nothing but a crazy idea and the courage to try it. Eugene Prewitt had both. And that made all the difference.